Let's make my deep dive quilt pattern that uses only a layer cake. Today I am using Ahoy Me Hearties by Clare from Moda Fabrics. Now this is an older collection, but Clare does come out with newer collections that do have this same color palette and style, which actually she has one coming out later this year. But anyways, let's get started. For each 42 count 10-inch square, you will cut two 2.5-inch by 8.5-inch rectangles and two 5-inch squares. And you'll just repeat this step to all of your 10-inch squares. Once everything is cut, you are going to select two different prints in a 5-inch square. On one of them, on the back side, you are going to draw a 45-degree line with a fabric marking tool. Then you will place those two squares right sides together directly on top of each other and sew a 1/4-inch seam allowance on both sides of that line you just drew. Afterwards, with a rotary cutter or fabric scissors, you will cut on that line that you drew to create two half square triangles. Then with those half square triangles, you're going to trim them to a 4.5-inch square. Then with those half square triangles, you're going to pick a color or print and create a flying geese block like this with two different prints in a 2.5-inch by 8.5-inch rectangles on top. Now we are going to sew everything back together again, and we are going to first start with the flying geese blocks. Then you are going to sew the two 2.5-inch by 8.5-inch rectangles together. And lastly, you will then sew these two units together to complete an 8.5-inch quilt block. And that's it. Pretty easy, fun, and quick, and all you have to do is repeat this step until you have made a total of 42 quilt blocks. But once all of your blocks are completed, you will lay them out in a 6x7 layout with the odd rows pointing your flying geese upwards. And then for the even rows, you'll rotate your blocks 180 degrees to point your flying geese downwards. Once you start laying your quilt blocks out, you'll start to see this scrappy chevron appear, which is something that I really love about this pattern. Then, as always, you will sew your blocks together to form rows, and then lastly, sew your rows together to complete your quilt top. And here is what my deep dive quilt pattern looks like all finished. I am really loving that scrappy chevron that is appearing, and if you have a layer cake with equal amounts of light and dark fabrics, this could be something to have fun with and play with as well. But anyways, for the backing, I am using a navy grunge fabric that is similar to this collection, and for the thread choice, I'm going with glide threads in the color Anchor. And here is what my quilt looks like all finished. One 42 count layer cake will yield you a 48-inch by 56-inch quilt, and two layer cakes with a 8x10 layout will yield you a twin size quilt measuring at 64 inches by 80 inches, just to give you a few more options. But as for the quilting, I went with my Mirage edge-to-edge pattern, which I will have linked down below in the description. Also, if you would like me to quilt your quilt, I have opened up my Longarm quilting services, and I will have a link for the form down below in the description as well. And I do hope you have enjoyed today's tutorial. If you could please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can be notified for your next amazing quilt project.